Snow fell like soft whispers from the sky, drifting gently over the quiet town of Willow Ridge. It was early morning. The kind of morning where the world felt paused, as if holding its breath. Streetlights glowed through the white haze, cars moved slowly, and the air tasted like cold beginnings. Inside the old bus station on Maple Street, 20-7-year-old Evan Carter sat alone on a wooden bench, staring at the cracked tile floor as though it might offer him answers he couldn't find anywhere else. His hands trembled slightly, whether from the cold or from everything happening around him. He couldn't tell. In his jacket pocket was a folded letter, worn at the edges, despite being less than a week old. He had read it at least 100 times. "You need to find your own path, son. 1. I can't walk with you. Maybe distance will help you understand who you're meant to be." His father's handwriting. Sharp. Final. It wasn't the words themselves that broke him, it was the weight behind them. Evan always believed that someday they'd talk, fix things, understand each other, but instead, his father had packed up and left, slipping away from their home in the middle of the night. No goodbye, no explanation, just that letter on the kitchen table. People like to say heartbreak comes from lovers. But sometimes it comes from the person who taught you how to ride a bike or tie your shoes. Sometimes it comes from the person you spent your whole life trying to make proud. Evan's throat tightened as he pressed his fingertips to his forehead. He had come to the bus station thinking maybe he'd leave town too. Maybe distance would help him forget. But he hadn't bought a ticket. He hadn't even stood up to approach the counter. He was a man suspended between hurt and hope, between running away and staying, between the father he wanted and the father he had. The sliding doors hissed open, letting in a gust of icy wind, snapping him from the fog of his thoughts. A woman entered, holding 2 overflowing grocery bags. Snow dusted her hair and the shoulders of her gray coat. She walked briskly, but the bottom of one bag ripped open, spilling canned food across the floor. Evan didn't hesitate. Before a single can could roll under a vending machine, he was already kneeling, scooping them up. "Oh no," the woman gasped, crouching beside him. "I'm so sorry." "Thank you. It's okay," Evan said softly. "Happens." When they finished gathering everything, she gave him a grateful smile. "I'm Lydia," she said. "Evan," she nodded toward the row of ticket counters. "You waiting for a bus?" "Not sure," he answered truthfully. Something in his voice must have told her there was more beneath the surface. But she didn't pry. She simply smiled kindly. "You know," she said gently, "sometimes the hardest part isn't choosing where to go, it's accepting why you want to leave." Her words felt like they had been shaped from the ache in his chest. Before Evan could respond, she stood, adjusted her bags, and gave him one last warm look before walking out. For a moment, he watched her through the frosted glass as she disappeared into the white fog outside. Just as he was settling back onto the bench, the station doors opened again. This time, an elderly man stepped inside, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. His breathing was slow, labored, and his eyes darted around in confusion. Evan noticed the man's panic before hearing the words. I need a bus to Riverbend," the man said to the clerk. "My wife was taken to the hospital there. She fainted this morning. I need to get to her." The clerk replied apologetically, "I'm sorry, sir. All buses to Riverbend are canceled due to the snowstorm." The old man's expression crumpled. He stumbled back, gripping his cane with trembling hands. Evan watched the moment hope left his eyes. Like a candle snuffed out by wind, Evan stood again, pulled by something deeper than logic. He approached slowly. "Sir, are you all right?" The old man tried to respond, but his voice cracked. I just need to be with my wife. We've been married 58 years. She fainted while cooking, and the ambulance took her." His chin quivered. "She hates hospitals. She be scared." Evan exhaled, feeling something shift inside him. He had lost his mother years ago. He knew what helplessness felt like, what regret felt like, what it meant to want one more chance. And he knew he could not let this man sit here alone. "I have a car," Evan said quietly. "I can take you to Riverbend." The man froze. You'd do that for me?" "Of course." The man's eyes watered. "Thank you. My name is Henry." "I'm Evan." Together, they stepped outside into the biting wind. Snow swirled around them like tiny pieces of frozen hope, trying to find a place to land. As they got into Evan's car, Henry studied him carefully. "You seem like a young man who's carrying a heavy load," he said softly. Evan gave a small, humorless smile. "Something like that. Helping an old man like me won't fix everything," Henry said gently. "But sometimes helping someone else helps you understand the parts of yourself you've forgotten." Evan didn't respond, but the words sunk deep. The drive was slow and quiet. Snow layered the highways, and visibility faded to a hazy blur. But for the first time in days, Evan didn't feel alone. Henry talked softly about his wife, Margaret, how she loved roses, how she hated thunderstorms, how she always made too much soup in winter. The love in his voice made Evan's chest ache. "Tell me something," Henry said after a while. "What are you running from?" The question hit harder than it should have. Evan swallowed. "My father left, packed up and walked away last week." Henry nodded slowly, as if he understood more than he let on. "Did he tell you why?" "No, just a letter saying he needed distance." Henry sighed. "Distance is a strange thing, Evan. Sometimes people use it to protect themselves, and sometimes to protect the people they love." Evan frowned. "What do you mean?" Henry looked out at the white horizon. "A person rarely leaves without carrying their own pain." The words lingered in the car like warm breath in cold air when they reached the hospital. Henry grabbed Evan's hand and squeezed it tight. "Come meet her. If she wakes up and sees me with you, she think I made a new friend on the way." Evan smiled gently. "I'd like that." Inside the hospital room, Margaret lay pale but breathing steadily. When Henry sat beside her and held her hand, something in the room softened. Evan felt as if he were witnessing something sacred. After a few minutes, a nurse entered. "Good news," she said. "She fainted due to low blood sugar, but she's stable now. She'll wake up soon." Henry exhaled a shaky breath of relief. He closed his eyes, whispering a silent prayer. When he looked at Evan again, gratitude shimmered in his eyes. "You brought me here," Henry said. "That's something I can never repay." "You don't need to," Evan said quietly. "But I must give you something," Henry insisted. "Advice, maybe, the kind that took me 80 years to learn." Evan felt a small smile tug at his lips. "Okay." Henry leaned forward. "Don't let someone else's silence become your punishment. Your father leaving isn't your fault, and it isn't the end of your story." The words hit harder than expected. As Henry turned back to his wife, Evan felt a strange warmth fill the cold spaces inside him. He stayed a while longer, listening to Henry talk to Margaret until her eyelids fluttered open. When she finally saw Evan, she smiled weakly. "And who's this handsome young man?" Henry chuckled. "Our guardian angel." Evan looked away shyly, but the words soaked into him like sunlight. Later, when he finally stepped back outside into the snow, he felt different, lighter somehow. Not healed, but healing. Instead of driving back to the empty house he shared with memories of his father, Evan drove to the hill overlooking Willow Ridge. The storm had slowed, and the clouds were thinning, letting faint light break through. He stepped out of the car and let the cold wind sting his face. For the first time in days, he let himself cry, not the silent, bottled-up kind, but honest tears that came from a place deeper than anger or sadness. He cried for his father. He cried for the conversations they should have had. He cried for the boy he used to be, and for the man he wanted to become. When he finally opened his eyes, the sky had cleared, revealing a gentle early afternoon glow. Snow stretched across the fields like a blank page, a fresh start. His phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Evan, it's your dad. I'm sorry for leaving the way I did. I'm trying to work through things I never understood how to talk about. I miss you. When you're ready, I'd like to talk." Evan stared at the words, his breath catching. For the first time since the letter, he didn't feel abandoned. He felt human. He felt hopeful. He typed back slowly. "I'm ready when you are. We can figure this out together." As he hit send, he looked out over the quiet town, the town where broken paths had crossed that morning. Lydia's gentle words, Henry's trembling hope, Margaret's tired smile. Each moment stitched something inside him back together. Evan stepped toward his car, feeling the weight of his pain lessen, not disappear, but become something he could carry without sinking. Because he finally understood. No road is too broken when kindness becomes the bridge. No past is too painful when hope becomes the guide. And no heart is too lost when compassion leads us home. That day, Evan had set out searching for a way to escape. Instead, he found a new way to live, where broken paths meet hope. Healing begins. The days that followed moved slowly, but they felt different from the heaviness that had weighed on Evan before. Each morning seemed a little brighter, each breath a little easier, as if the world itself was nudging him toward the future instead of the past. A week after the hospital trip, Evan found himself back at the same bus station on Maple Street, but this time, he wasn't there to run away. He was there to meet someone. The doors opened, and Henry stepped inside. Leaning on his cane but smiling with the warmth of someone who had known joy, loss, and everything in between. Margaret wasn't with him. She was resting at home, but she insisted he go. You saved me that day, Henry said as they hugged. But you did more than that. You reminded me of the goodness in people. And you reminded me that kindness still matters. Evan replied. They sat together on the same bench where Evan had been sitting alone just days ago, but the silence between them felt peaceful now, not heavy. Henry looked at him with soft, knowing eyes. Did you talk to your father? Evan nodded. We talked last night. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And that's more than I expected. And how do you feel? Henry asked gently. Evan exhaled, letting the truth settle on his tongue. Hopeful. Henry smiled. Then you're already halfway home. Evan glanced around the station, the cracked tiles, buzzing lights, faded posters and realized something unexpected. This place, the same place where he once felt lost, now felt like the beginning of something new. I wanted to tell you, Evan said. I'm thinking of starting something, a community group or a helpline or place where people who feel stuck can talk without judgment. Henry's eyes lit up with pride. That's exactly what this world needs. People who turn their wounds into reasons to help others. Evan felt that truth settle deep inside him. His broken path hadn't ended, it had simply changed direction. A few minutes later, as Henry prepared to leave, he pressed something into Evan's hand. A small silver coin, worn and warm from the old man's palm. This belonged to my father, Henry said. He used to tell me, whenever you feel lost, look at this coin and remember, tomorrow always comes. I want you to have it. Evan stared at the coin, speechless. Henry, I can't accept this. You already have, Henry said with a wink. Besides, you're at the beginning of something important, and beginnings should never be empty-headed. They hugged once more, a quiet, grateful embrace between two souls whose paths crossed at exactly the right moment. As Henry walked out into the daylight, Evan remained seated, holding the coin tightly. He didn't cry this time. Instead, he smiled a genuine soul-deep smile. 1 week earlier, he had been a man trying to escape his life. Now, he was a man ready to build one. That night, Evan called his father again. This time, they talked longer. About the past. About mistakes. About the silence that had lived between them. And slowly, carefully, they began to understand each other. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was progress. And sometimes progress is the bravest thing a heart can make. Months later, Willow Ridge saw something new on Main Street, a small center with a blue sign above the door that read, The Hope House, for anyone finding their way. Inside were warm lights, comfortable chairs, and a wall covered with handwritten notes from people who walked through the door and left their burdens behind. Evan stood in the center one evening, watching strangers talk, laugh, cry, and heal. Lydia, the woman from the bus station, had become one of the volunteers, helping people with the same warmth she had once shown him. Henry and Margaret visited often. Margaret always brought homemade cookies. Henry always told someone, "This young man saved me in a snowstorm." Even though Evan insisted, they saved each other. Evan reached into his pocket and touched the silver coin, worn smooth from months of being carried everywhere he went. A reminder, tomorrow always comes. A reminder, kindness turns broken paths into bridges. A reminder, hope is something you create, even from pain. As evening light filtered through the windows of the Hope House, Evan stood silently, feeling the weight of everything he had survived and everything he had become. He had thought his journey began in pain, but now he understood. His journey truly began the moment he chose to help someone else. Because when compassion becomes your direction, you always end up exactly where you're meant to be.